Brah. Welcome everyone to another episode of Dice and Brushes, Warhammer Imperium unbagging, unboxing, whichever way you want to go about it. Either way, we got issues 84 all the way into 87. 84 has a Admech, I believe he's a Marshal? Scutari Marshal, yep. Let's see if I can get that in good so you can see a little bit. He's got a little scepter. I think that's a radium pistol that he has as well. Neat little cloak. Of course, he's going to be standing on a tactical rock. But also, he's one of the few AdMech models I've noticed to actually have a sword in a scabbard. Very odd. It's got a 32mm round base, and I'll set that aside for Brett to add to his collection. And let's just go right in. Alright, so right off the bat, much like all the others, we have just some little bit of minor info about the Scutari Marshal, about the servo skull that they have, the control stave, their radium serpenta, which is, yeah, it's a radiation pistol. It shoots radioactive bullets at you just in case regular bullets weren't enough. It tells you how he's got enhanced bionics, as he's just a little more intelligent than the average Scutari. That's really it. But let's keep on going. Of course, if you're doing a campaign, you can have a battle record here. Then the Eldari Paths of the Assyriani. This goes into a good bit of detail of how the Eldar mind works. I shouldn't say detail, just a light overview. But the Eldar are very prone to hyperfixating on a task until it is perfected. So, washing dishes, you learn to wash dishes and you practice washing dishes until it's absolutely perfect. If you're making a souffle, you are going to make the perfect souffle within 100 years. Path of the Warrior, you are going to practice and practice and train and train and train and train for hundreds of years before you go on your first battlefield. You are going to try to hone your craft to perfection before you even step out. Which, speaking of which, we do have Path of the Outcast. These are what you'll commonly see as the Rangers. Path of the Warrior. This takes the warrior path, so the aspect warriors. So you think Dire Avengers, Howling Banshees, Striking Scorpions, etc. And then we have Path of the Seer. So these are usually more your Farseers, your Spirit Seers, but also your Warlocks. Although commonly Warlocks have also trod the path of the warrior at some point. And even better yet, the Path of the Outcast, Path of the Warrior, and Path of the Seer are three of the books in a series that is available at the Black Library and is absolutely phenomenal story from an Eldar perspective. I'm not going to give away too much of that story or that book series, I should say, because it's just so much to get into that I'm not going to do it for this video. We have Magnetha Primus. This is basically a story about Admech versus Tyranids, including Elictors. I do like the Lictors, and how the Admech actually seek them out. Yes, Admech can actually find Lictors. Right, and then of course we're going to have your how to build and how to paint your Scutari Marshal that you just received using the paints that you should have received within this over the course of the Warhammer Imperium. Then of course we got the 9th edition basic rules for the Admech. We have a few of their warlord traits, a little bit of how the Battlesphere uplink works, a picture to go with the galvanic rifle description so you can identify what a galvanic rifle is, as well as a plasma caliver. We have the 9th edition data sheet. Let's see, let's actually move this down a little bit so you can see a little bit more, maybe. There we go. Let's adjust that picture a little bit. All right. And of course, the tutorial on how Control Edict used to work. It is mostly the same in essence, but the details of how it works have changed. Then, of course, we have the campaign mission. Scyphos besieged. Necrons versus the Imperium. And this one is actually pretty darn good. This is pretty standard for 9th edition, but also there are some 10th edition missions which will be somewhat similar depending on what cards you draw. In fact, one of my latest games was 3 objectives in no man's land and small deployment zones for each player. And then, of course, at the back, we have a sneak peek into the next few issues coming up, on which we'll do 85 next. And on to 85. Here we have the Hexmark Destroyer, a character for the Necrons. Excuse me. Basically, he's the kind of weird destroyer unit character that snipes with pistols. 6 of them, to be precise. Yeah, a little odd, but you know what? We'll run with it. Especially in Necrons. Alright, let's open this up. A little bit of lore about the equipment for the Hexmark Destroyer starts you off. About why he's got so many eyes and looks like a spider face. His Enmitic Disintegrator Pistol, or rather pistols, because again, there's 6 of these buggers. And let's see his optimized firing patterns, because he is a robot, and he makes sure that he is efficient, as well as being a destroyer unit. All he wants to do is kill. Of course, if you're having campaign, here's the battle record page. Then we have some lore on Ezekiel, Grandmaster of the Dark Angel Librarians. He does have the Book of Salvation, which has some kind of lore that nobody else but Ezekiel is allowed to know, basically. Tells you a little bit about his sword, Trader's Bane. I don't remember if he's gotten his Primaris upgrade yet, or if that's still in the works. Then we got a little bit of lore on Samael, Grandmaster of the Ravenwing, the Dark Angel's second company. The one that's almost exclusively bike units, which are now the Outriders and the Invader ATVs. And they used to have Storm Speeders, but I guess now would be they were Land Speeders. I guess now they're Storm Speeders. So that's made a dramatic change for the Dark Angels. But that Ravenwing Grandmaster Samael still has the Corvex jet bike, which is from the Dark Age of Technology, supposedly a long-lost STC. But realistically, I'm guessing if the AdMech really wanted to, given that there's some knowledge on how to make flying jet bikes for the Custodes, I'm sure they could make more for Grandmaster of the Ravenwing. But the AdMech don't like changing things up. They don't like inventing new things. That is all heresy. Then we got a inquisitorial report on the basics of how Tyranid invasion go. Tells you a little bit how they work from space, how their spore pods work, which are actually in-game units that you can use. I think they basically work a lot like drop pods, just fleshy, living versions. Tells you the difference between termagants and the hormagants, as well as the gene stealers over here. Then Inquisitor also tells you a little bit about the Inari. They're newer, I don't want to say faction, but I also don't want to say sub-faction for the Eldar, because with them, you can take elements of Craftworld Eldar, you can take Harlequins, which were their own thing for a little while, and also the Drukhari, all in one somewhat cohesive force. It does tell you a little bit, but not a whole lot, about Yvraine, what she was able to do with at Baltan, and her revival of Gilman. Tells you a little bit about the Vizarch, but not the details, like how the Vizarch was at one point a oh, I can't think of the name now. Darn it. Exarch. There we go. The Vizarch was in the Exarch for Yvraine when I believe they were Dire Avengers together. But soon after, Yvraine left the Craftworld Baltan for Kamara, and the Vizarch left to follow her, went to the, oh, what are they called? The Incubi Temple. He slew one of their leaders, became an Incubi for a while, until Yvraine kind of had her epiphany where she lost her arm to uh, Lilith Hesprax and was after killed, she was reborn, and then the Vizarch took her under his wing for a while and told her about Iniad, and it's a whole thing. If you want the full story, try to look up the Gathering Storm series. It's a long, long, but interesting read. And then after that, let's get this better in shot here. We have In Search of Plunder is a short story. It's basically Necron Cryptek versus some Cadian Khazarkins, which are basically special forces of the Cadians, on a Space Hulk. They're both looking for loot, and it's really not much more than that. That's really what it all boils down to, because it's only 2 pages. And of course, we have how to build your Hexmark Destroyer that you just received, how to paint, good bit there. We have the 9th edition datasheet. I should note that as of recording this, the new Necron Codex for 10th edition just came out today, so that the index, if you have it, is no longer valid. Then the old tutorial on how the multi-threat eliminator used to work, and inescapable death. Then we have Jalama Kalama's skull. I cannot pronounce that for the life of me. Another campaign mission for this Warhammer Imperium magazine. And this has 6 objectives. You could adapt this for 10th edition by removing one of the objectives, by one of the more middle objective, either number 2 or number 5. Remove one of them and put the other one in the very center of the board, and I think you would have a simple adaptation for 10th edition. Right, and before we go on to this goodness, we have the March to War. It's a multi-page fold-out for the Smurfs, or the Leagues of Wotan, space dwarves. Tells you a little bit about some of their sub-factions. The Cronus Hegemony, the Greater Thurian League, and the Ymir Conglomerate. Tells you a little bit of lore about their calls. The Einhir Hearthguard. Oop, let's flip to the back there. Their Brokir Thunderkin, which are basically their heavy weapons guys. Their Hernkune Pioneers. If you've ever seen the models with the jet bikes that, or the, they're not really jet bikes. Think if you took a three-wheeler and put the wheels on their side and make them hover, and then put a giant gun in the back. That is the Hernkune Pioneers. Then tells you a little bit about their core warriors, the Hearthkin Warriors. And then let's go to this. In the next few issues, they're going to be giving us parts and some lore about the Redemptor Dreadnoughts. And then let's actually go take a look at one of those sprues, shall we? Okay, let's take a look at the first sprue that this extra section of the Warhammer Imperium is giving us. Or rather, selling us for very cheap, I should say, compared to the normal. We have the main guns. We have a few side guns here. Some of the parts of the leg. A few front options. And looks like we have... Is that... Yeah, I believe that's the flamer option. There we go. Put that on the pile for Brett. And then let's look at this first section here. So, a little bit of lore on the Redemptor Dreadnoughts' various weapon systems, and there are quite a few. The Icarus Rocketpod, the Macroplasma Incinerator. If you want to replace that, you can do so with the Heavy Onslaught Gatling Cannon. We got Storm Bolters. We have a regular size Onslaught Gatling Cannon right in the Redemptor Fist, or rather right below it, and the Gatling Cannon there can be replaced with a Heavy Flamer. There is no shortage of shooting options in Primaris vehicles. Of course, if you want to have a nice little battle record, we got that. Then we have a short little lore about Astrath the Grim, Redeemer of the Lost, which is a High Chaplain of the Blood Angels. But in addition to normal chaplain's duties, it is basically his mission to kill members of the Blood Angels who are suffering the Black Rage even after battle. So they'll send up their own members with the Black Rage to fight in battle, hopefully to die. If they live through the battle, Astrath is supposed to kill them. It's a grim task, but he's one of the few that will do it. And Lamartes, Guardian of the Lost, he used to be the High Chaplain in old lore. It was then retconned for Astrath the Grim to be such. In the newer lore, Lamartes was one of those Blood Angels suffering from the Black Rage that survived a battle and demanded Astrath let him live. And Astrath was impressed that Lamartes was so coherent that he just said, you know what, we'll just put you in stasis until I can examine you, and then otherwise you can lead the Death Company into battle. But Then going on, we have a little war zone in Katachan. Katachan is, to put a real world equivalent, think if you combined uh, the U.S. versus Vietnam War during the decades ago, but also made them Australian. That's probably the best way I could describe it. Because the Catachin home jungle homeworld is the closest real life equivalent we have is, quite frankly, Australia. Just for the amount of creatures and flora that will kill you. Sorry, guys, but you all Aussies, you got the worst of it. You guys are the real life catachins. Then we got the Tyranids Assault. Little report from Inquisitor Gallius Sharn. Just it continues off where the last issue had began, or it begins where the last issue left off. Blech. It would help if I got my references right. Anyway, it talks a little bit about synapse creatures, basically kill these first. Tells you a little bit about the spores, a little bit about the venom thrope, and then it tells you roughly how Tyranids like to assault fortified positions using I think they're called Ravagers? Raveners? Maybe Raveners? Uh, Carnifexes and Hive Tyrants. And then we have some basic lore about the Flesh Terrors, how they're a second founding chapter. They're more prone to the Black Rage than other successor chapters of the Blood Angels. Excuse me. Talks about their role in defending Baal during the Tyranid invasion, and how they were almost wiped out, but got reinforcements from the Indominus Crusade with the Primaris. And they didn't really trust the new Primaris Marines. The Primaris had to match their firstborn brother's ferocity in battle in order to be accepted. And even before that, Chapter Master Gabriel Seth, the guy pictured with a giant Inviscerator chainsword here, he beat the living crap out of one of his Primaris captains after they were sent to reinforce him. The Primaris captain thought it would not be an even match, thought that he would get one over on Gabriel Seth. He was like, no, you're fighting me, and just beat the crap out of him. Right. Then for our little war story here, we have the Catachins, aka the Australians, versus the Orcs on Catachin. So, needless to say, the Orcs are not very stealthy or careful about how they go through dangerous fauna. And the Catachin patrol basically goes, I kind of hope that the fauna does our job for us. And in short, they do. Oh, and this was actually the cover art for, I believe it was was it the second or third edition? Probably third or even fourth edition. I forget. Uh, Not really Codex expansion or supplement, something kind of in between. Where the Catachins had their own entire rule set separate from the Imperial Guard. See, just goes into long in depth. Let's see, this is actually how many pages? 1, 2, 3. I'm not going to count that one. 4, 5 pages of a Catachin patrol versus some orcs and having the fauna kill the orcs. Next up, we have the 9th edition Redemptor Dreadnought datasheet. Don't rely on this for 10th edition at all. It's not even remotely accurate anymore. The best this is right now is to help you identify between the macro plasma incinerator versus the heavy onslaught Gatling cannon and the heavy flamer versus the onslaught Gatling cannon. Then we have the campaign mission Invasion Megaria. Again, Necron. This time, Necrons are on the outside. On the outside here, and the Imperial forces are deployed in the center of the board, within 8 inches of the center of the board, I should be exact. And Necrons are the attackers, and are basically trying to completely envelop the Imperial forces on this. Kind of a last stand kind of thing for the Imperials. And then next up, we'll take a look at issue 87 and the sprue that comes with that. And here is the second sprue for the Redemptor Dreadnought. And let's get a little bit further away this time around. Some of that backpack power supply, a little more on the legs, some of the gears within that you may or may not see depending on how you pose him. The hips, the shoulder part, shoulder covers. Let's actually flip this around. It doesn't really matter if I flip it around. Unfortunately, mine is a little bit bent, but that's kind of what happens when you get these in the way that they are sent. It's just nature of it. Otherwise, the actual quality of the miniature has not been degraded at all by the warping of the sprue. It'll be just fine. Anyway, whoops, after I knock the magazine. Let's go into 87 here, the last one for this video. We start out with a little bit about the Sabbat Worlds campaign. This was the Imperium versus Chaos, particularly cultists of the Blood Pact, I believe. Gives you a little bit about Colonel Commissar Gaunt. Now, normally commissars cannot get a normal military rank like Major, Colonel, etc. However, in the Gaunt's Ghosts series, which, hey, Gaunt's Ghosts right over here, it does go into an in-depth explanation of how he got a military rank, why he is the exception. We have a little bit about the Sable Worlds campaign in general. We have a little bit about Warmaster Slato. And then over here, whoop, Gaunt's Ghosts. Some of the few remaining men of Tanith. Now, by now, it's been so long, all these guys would be dead. But for gameplay purposes, for fun, they keep them around. But they are the last surviving men of Tanith after Chaos destroyed the world, kind of like it destroyed Cadia. Only difference thing is with Tanith, the trees themselves migrated, so that the people of Tanith got to be really good scouts and trackers. But these few are all that remain of they are the Tanith first and only. Now, some of the Gaunt's Ghosts, they did pick up some members along the way. Tanith personally did pick up some ladies from a hive world that were all deaf and fighting for their hive world. And they ended up joining the Tanith first and only. So, I don't know if anything else became of that, but that was the last I read off reading in the Gaunt's Ghost series. Then we have the Chaos Command, as well as a little bit more about the Blood Pact, how they all wore smiling masks. Then we have a little bit about the Fulminators. They are the Ultima founding, so they're all Primaris. They're brand new chapter of Space Marines, just trying to prove themselves. Then we have a little bit of lore on the Howling Griffins. There's very strict adherence of the Codex Astartes that Gilliman wrote thousands of years ago, and even Gilliman says don't follow this to a T. They follow it to a T regardless. But on the other hand, they did accept the Primaris with open arms. Then over here, we have a continuation of the Imperial report about how Tyranids devour worlds. This paragraph has a little bit about how they use some giant spore towers in order to deliver nutrients, kind of like a space elevator up to a ship in orbit. How Ripper swarms kind of help chew down food in essence. Or how the role the Horospexes play. How pyrovores are basically just mobile digestive platforms. And it shows you the aftermath at the bottom of the page, of where it's just rock. There's no flora, there's no fauna, there's no minerals on the planet, not just on its surface, but when Tyranids devour a world, they go all the way down. They tunnel in deep. If there's any biomass anywhere on or inside that planet, they get it. Then we have a short story about, it's just called The Ascension, but this is from a Chaos Space Marines point of view, and he's trying to achieve demonhood. And he basically does that by slaughtering a whole bunch of Imperials, and Loyalist Space Marines in particular. But you gotta be careful when you seek out demonhood, because it turns out you can turn into a spawn instead. And that's apparently not what you want. Right. Then we finally have a how to build your Redemptor Dreadnought. It shows the main build, and it has an alternative build. You won't have all the parts yet. In fact, right now you don't have the base for sure. I don't know about the other parts. I haven't taken an in-depth look. But this shows you how to build the main and some alternative weapon options. Excuse me. And then the Defending Glyanthia campaign mission. This one is considerably more evenly paced than the last. Basically, Dawn of War deployment, 5 objectives, evenly spaced, nice, easy to adapt to 10th edition. And then we get a little hint of the next 2 out of 3 issues of the Warhammer Imperium. In the next issue, we'll be getting what remains of the Redemptor Dreadnought. In the mission, and the one after that, we'll get Inquisitor Draxus. And I believe issue 90 is going to be the last issue for the Warhammer Imperium magazine. As soon as that comes out, I'll try to get right on that for you guys. Until then, as we always say at Dice and Brushes, get your stuff painted.